So I was driving here today, as most of you also were, and I was listening to a podcast called Bacon Wrap Business. And the guest was some really successful serial entrepreneur. And a takeaway I heard from him is he said he wished he could go back and tell his 22-year-old self in his first business, which was janitorial services, that he's not in the janitorial services business, he's in the marketing business. And his business is marketing janitorial services. And it just so happens that the product he has is janitorial services. And that really resonated with me because I spend most of my time in marketing and sales with my company. And one of the things that has been most successful for us is webinars. And if you would have, if I would have presented on this topic a month ago, I probably would have shared with you what works for me. And we have thousands of people that attend our webinars every month from all around the world. And we spend a lot of money on advertising to get those people to attend these webinars. And, we have lots of people on the webinars, and we, have a canned presentation that fits the bill for most people. Because when there's hundreds of people on a webinar, that's the only way to do it. You put together a presentation that you think is going to fit the bill for most of the people there, and it's going to resonate with the audience that you're trying to reach. The problem with that is that for most people, it's very difficult to get thousands of people to attend your webinars every month, and I think it's unrealistic for a lot of people to do that. But there's a method that I discovered recently, and I'll tell you more about who I discovered it from, that I think is a model for using webinars that can be effective for pretty much everybody in this room, all right, and is much more realistic and attainable. So with the traditional webinar model, your best case scenario is probably going to be 10% to 15% of the people on the webinar will buy the product. If you're selling something that's a couple $100s, right? But it really relies on having a ton of volume. Lots of people, like I said, thousands of people signing up for the webinars. Every webinar you're doing has hundreds of people on it, so that if 10 people out of the 100 that are on buy your $200 product, you make a couple $1,000s, right? But there's a better way for small webinars that can get even better results, and I think, like I said, is a lot more attainable. And I learned this process when I sat down with this guy, Ted Miller, a month ago in San Diego. And Ted ran the sales department for Chet Holmes Company, which is something like $100 million a year operation. And he has a book coming out, it's not out yet, called Webinars That Sell, that I read an advanced copy of. And so the ideas that I'm going to be talking about today, I borrowed from him, and I'm just sharing with you because I'm really excited about it and how it's going to impact my business, and we're planning on doing these things as well. So even if your business is one that can get hundreds of people to attend a webinar, and you have a low price product that you're going to try and sell to them in kind of a stock canned kind of way, then you can also implement this kind of strategy to sell higher price tickets and services. Because my guess is that for most of the people in the room right now, you're more interested in selling bigger ticket items than a few $100s here or there, right? And this kind of process can work for services just as well as selling information products, which for my business, what we're planning on using this for is selling our services, companies that hire us to run lead generation campaigns for them. So there's really 3 steps that I want to talk to you about here, all right? So the first step is charge people to attend the webinar, okay? And I'm gonna share with you why. It's really important that I'll take a break to let everyone laugh about the dog. Yeah, right. So when you make a webinar free, 25% of people on average are going to show up, okay? When they have real skin in the game, you'll get more like 80% of people to show up, all right? Now, naturally, it's a lot harder to get somebody to hand you $100 or $150 to attend a webinar than it is to get them to sign up for a free webinar, all right? So there's marketing that has to happen to even get people to buy a ticket for this webinar. But the key here is that you really only need to sell about 13 tickets. You don't want more people on the webinar than that. All right, no more than 13 registrants, okay? And when you have about 13 people sign up with this kind of a model, and again, I'm sharing this off of all of the trial and error that Chet Holmes Company went through to really dial this model in and understand what works best. And they found that when you charge at least $100 or more to get people to sign up for your webinar, that on average 80% of those people will actually show up for the webinar. All right? And what happens then when you have 10 people live on a webinar is that you can really craft the presentation in a way that really speaks to them. You know, and you make sure that you tell them, show up 15 minutes early before we're going to start the presentation, right? So that we can really talk about your business and your situation and your needs and what you want to get out of our time together today. All right? And so then in the lead up before the webinar, you're chatting with each of them basically one-on-one to try and figure out what's going on in your business right now. Obviously, if it's a B2B situation, which most of the people in this room, that is the case. What's going on in your business right now? What challenges are you facing? Any questions related to what we're going to talk about today that you have already? And what you want to do is be able to then go into your presentation. You're not going to just be making it up on the fly then based on what they told you. You're going to have a presentation ready. And you got to bring the goods because they paid $100 to be there. So it can't be a sales pitch. It has to be high value. Okay? So that even if they don't buy something from you, they walk away feeling pretty good about their $100 or $150 that they spent and the hour and a half, 2 hours that they spent with you. But when you've got a presentation, you're pretty sure you know what you're going to talk about. You know what the offer is going to be at the end of the webinar for your services, a high-ticket product or program you sell, what have you. But you're able to really position everything along the way to speak to the challenges that they told you about in the lead-up. All right, so that then you can really position your product or services to be the solution for them. And you can't do that when you have hundreds of people on a webinar. You just can't. You can try and fake it. You can ask them questions, but you're still going to have to give the stock canned presentation. Or maybe you can speak to a couple people, but not every single one of them like you can with this method. And like I said, the third thing is tying your offer into their needs. So what you're going to be positioning at the end, like I'll just tell you for us, that what we're going to be offering on the webinar is a done-for-you LinkedIn lead generation service, and the initial ask is going to be $3,000. All right? And we're expecting that with the right people showing up for the webinar that already have skin in the game, they've already paid $100 to $150, so they're already a customer of ours, right? That on average, we should see 30% of the people on the webinar will take advantage of that if we position it right. And those are, those are the numbers from that the guys at Chet Holmes saw on average over time. And there's a lot of different ways to structure it and go about it. But if you start thinking about the numbers, it really is a pretty attractive scenario. Okay, so this is a quick scenario, and I will give Bill the slides in a PDF that he can email out to everybody if that sounds okay. Because I don't want everyone feeling like you have to chicken scratch this all down right now. But basically, the way these numbers work out, and I swear it was much more legible when I did it on my computer. Basically, it's a 250% increase in ROI when you compare these two scenarios. All right? And it's based off of selling a $1,000 product. All right? And comparing the old way of doing it with lots of people on a webinar to the power of what you can do when you really have a much smaller group on the webinar. All right? And at the end of the day, for most of us, getting that many people on a webinar to begin with is not really feasible, to get hundreds of people to sign up. And it's something I have really wrestled with over the last year or so as I've been talking more and sharing my experience with using webinars. Because oftentimes I feel like when I'm talking to somebody or sharing with a group of people like I am today about how to run ad campaigns to generate thousands of leads a month, it's just not really, it's not a fit for most people to market like that. And this kind of a model can work no matter really the size of your market, because if you can get 10 people on a webinar, then this can really be effective for you. So really it comes down to doing a few things. The first thing you got to do is you have to have a webinar that's going to convert, right? It's not as simple as just getting Excel up and crunching some numbers and making it look good, like that last scenario I showed you. You can make the numbers look any way you want, but at the end of the day, you still have to have a webinar that's compelling and will convert, all right? And there's a lot that goes into that. We don't have a ton of time today, so I can't really dive into that. But there are plenty of resources out there on creating webinars that are compelling and convert. And the second thing then is figure out how to get those 13 people to give you $100 to show up on your webinar. The sales team at Chet Holmes Company, they have 2 specific roles when it comes to executing on this process. They have salespeople whose entire job is to get people to buy the ticket, and then they have salespeople who actually do the presentation on the webinar. So there's 2 unique people that have distinct roles. So the guy that's marketing the webinars spends a lot of time on the phone, cold calling, maybe reaching out via email. It just depends on your business what makes sense from a marketing standpoint. For us, it's going to be emailing customers that have bought Linked University. So they've already spent some money with us, asking them to sign up for a $150 webinar that's going to be really next level content is not a huge ask. So you might think about that. Maybe some of your existing customers could be a fit. Maybe it's Facebook ads. Because when I went through the scenario here, let me jump back. What I didn't even plug in here is the fact that you have revenue generated from the ticket sales. 13 people buying a $100 ticket, let's say, is $1,300. So you could add that to the bottom line as well to make this look even more attractive. But I left it off because I figure, you know what, you might spend that much money advertising this. So that's kind of like a break even there. Spend $1,300 on Facebook ads and LinkedIn ads and whatever makes sense for your business. If you're doing it right and you've got something compelling, you might be able to get 13 people to buy, right? So getting the people in the door is going to be a critical part of it, all right? And then the third thing is to figure out how to really scale the process, right? So for my business, initially I'm going to do it all until I figure out how to make it work. And then ideally the goal would be that we could have a webinar running like this every single day for the business. Now that might not be something that everybody needs to do. Maybe for you it's do one of these a month, and that would be fantastic. Everybody's business is different. But there definitely is a way when you've got a process to scale this kind of thing, just like the guys at Chet Holmes are doing, where they've got other people doing it. And the person that owns the company, the president, CEO, does not have any part to play in this process. But he probably had a part to play in designing the process and doing it initially and figuring out how it worked and then getting the right people on board to actually execute it. All right? And then from there, you just got to get pumped up and make it happen. And you'll be like this guy riding around on a motorcycle bench pressing. I just wanted to put that image in there. And I figured that'd be a good way to close. So what questions do you guys have? What you want to look for, what kind of business is yours again? Wardrobe consulting?
Consulting and a clothing line.
Sure, okay. So B2C is not my area of expertise. But the resources I know of, just off the top of my head, we have a program called Webinar University that has a decent amount of training in it and some pretty good stuff that I would recommend. There's programs by Russell Brunson, who's a very well-known internet marketer, has what I've heard is a really, really great course on webinars. And I think Frank Kern, who probably a lot of people have heard of, is like a really, really famous internet marketing guy, has a good program as well. So those are a few to check into. And then I would also say to write down Webinars That Sell, which is Ted Miller's book that's going to be coming out sometime in the near future, that is really what I talked about today. And he'll have more stuff in there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
What's the length of a webinar?
It really depends. But for this kind of a webinar, I think you need to be prepared to spend potentially as much as 2 hours. It doesn't mean that the presentation has to last that long. So your main presentation of the content, the training portion of the webinar where you're really teaching and adding value, for this kind of a webinar could be 45 minutes to an hour, something like that. And then you might have another 15 minutes or so where you're then making the offer, of whatever it is. Hey, if you want to learn or if you want to work with me to really do what I walked you through today, I've got a few open spots for clients to work with. They're first come, first serve. And just put out an informal offer like that. There's a lot of ways to do it where you don't have to come off feeling like a used car salesman. But at the end of the day, it is sales, so you are selling. But so between the main content and the offer, you might be an hour and 15 minutes, and then lots of Q&A, and hey, if the people are there hanging out and still asking questions, and you're still trying to move them along in the process, you want to stay there as long as you can till they are feeling confident enough to move forward, Because this is the kind of webinar where you want people to make those numbers that I was showing you on that scenario. You want people to commit, right there on the webinar. And it's the easiest way to do it is if you expect 30% of the people on the webinar to become clients of yours, then it's very easy to tell them towards the end of the webinar that if there's 10 people on, you tell them, I've got 3 spots available for new clients that would be interested in working with me to make this happen for you and your business. Here's what that process would look like, and here's how you can commit to being one of those 3. And we've got 10 people on this call right now. Seriously, I can only take 3 spots, so they're really first come, first serve. If we end up having more than that, then we'll put you on a waiting list for next month or something like that.
Well, is there a best time or date for a webinar in your series?
It's all over the board depending on what your customers are into. In some markets, in the evening is good if most of your customers have daytime jobs, for example. For us, we do a lot of webinars on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock Central. But there's a lot of people that like doing webinars on Thursdays. Some of it depends on if the offer you're making is going to be only available then on the webinar, if you're going to give some people some time to think about it. So then you got to think about when do you want that offer to close, which is kind of a strategic decision. You wouldn't want it to be, it closes Friday night at 9 p.m. because the people are out having dinner and stuff, And so then you got to sometimes think about when's the offer going to close? How much time do I want to give these people after the webinar to think about this and make this decision? And then you can back into the webinar date that way too. But there's some research out there from big webinar companies that have done studies of attendees and registrants. On24 has a report on what they say statistically are the best days and times. So check that out. But it really depends on your business. Tom?
Josh,
This webinar, and I think my time is about up, but this kind of a webinar, you can't do it automated because it's made for a small, intimate audience where you can really dig into people's situations, and you just can't fake that, But you can get to the point where if you've really got it down, that you can hire salespeople or people that are skilled in doing this kind of thing and have them do it for you. So as far as you're concerned, it is automated, So thank you.
thank you.